Well, hey, good morning. Do it for a dayers. It's Monday, man, May 22nd, 22 days in, and we're going at it. We're going for it. We're going after it. We're creating habits for the future. Good morning to everybody. I'm Todrick Miller, and I've committed to over the next 30 days helping as many people as I can, myself first, to tap into our full potential to unlock our next. And man, listen, I got two things to get into today. I'm field tripping with my son, so I had to kind of try to alter some things a little bit, and it just kind of fits right in with the train of thought for today, which is switch it up. Sometimes routine is our best friend, and then routine that's become too routine becomes potentially an enemy, right? I know it doesn't make sense yet, but just stick around for the conversation, and perhaps maybe it'll make sense before the end of this. I think I want to talk about two things today. I want to talk about risk first, and then I want to talk about routine as well. It's risky, man. Anytime that you are attempting, anytime that you are training yourself to become a higher leveled version of yourself, man, it's always risky. It's risky because sometimes you question yourself, sometimes you doubt yourself, sometimes you're confused with yourself, and then sometimes you have other voices that are not helping the matter any better, because sometimes people, they mean well sometimes, but they just don't mean well, right? uh, Sometimes people love you, but they just don't really quite understand you at this particular moment of your life. And so it's risky because it will potentially cause you to lose. And the first risk is losing you. And for some, that seems and sounds far-fetched, but if you're really after making or breaking, starting or stopping, and forming habits for the future, then it requires us to know that sometimes there's parts of us that we need to lose. And those parts of us, that lower level thinking part of us, that negative part of us, that unproductive part of us, right? That lazy part of us, right? That self-entitled part of us, those parts of us that are literally keeping us in and holding patterns from our future selves. It's okay to lose that part of you. It's okay to lose the part of you that's always doubting you, always questioning you, second guessing you. Like, yes, it's okay to lose that part of you. And the reward is always going to be worth the risk when it's calculated enough to the point that I'm doing what I need to do to become the best or better version of myself. And so, man, when with habit formation, it literally requires that we look at ourselves and we see beyond what we are, where we are now, and we see a vision of the foreseeable future. That if you don't know where you want to go, you tend to stay where you are. And so I know I'm talking to people who have a vision of greater. I know I'm talking to people who have a concept that is greater than the context of where you are now and who you are now. And so we're not just after changing, we're literally after becoming someone. And so it's risky. It's risky because you're deconstructing, right? It's risky because you're tearing down. It's risky because you are undoing. It's risky because you're reprogramming. It's risky because you're attempting to do something that the average person is too lazy to even set out to attempt. There are so many people who claim to be unhappy with themselves, but yet they're unwilling to take the risk to undo their present self, to become their future self, right? And so you make the lesser you shut up, so the greater you can stand up. And you do it at the risk of this me versus me. It's where it's, I think that was Jamal Bryant who wrote the book, World War Me, right? This man, this war, the greatest battle that we'll ever fight won't be with people. The greatest battle that we'll ever fight will be with ourselves. It'll be with ourselves to stop talking ourselves out of what God has already talked us into, to stop listening to people who will tell you not to do something, not because you can't do it, but just because they don't want to see you be the one to do it. And then you got to have the wisdom enough to know who to listen to and who not to listen to, who's wise counsel and who's wicked counsel. It's risky, man. It's risky. And so I want to tell you this, that the reward will be greater than the risk. And so you've got to take the risk. If we don't take the risk, then we become like the story of these a company that received that went into a meeting, rather not received, but they went into a meeting with two gentlemen. The meeting actually happened right here in Dallas, at Renaissance Tower. Two gentlemen go into a meeting with a major company and corporation, and they pitch their business to their business model, their new business model to a to an established business model. And the two guys were responsible for the startup of a company by the name of Netflix. Netflix was only 2 years old at the time of this meeting with Blockbuster. And Netflix wanted to pitch to Blockbuster, hey, we have a concept that we believe could add to what you have already proven works. You've already proven an in-store model. Well, we have a model that is digital and online, and we would like to sell our company to you for an online arm to your already working business model. Well, needless to say, Blockbuster refused to buy Netflix for that 50 mil that day, which it's ironic that 50 mil was about 3 days worth of revenue for Blockbuster. So it wasn't that they couldn't afford it. It was just that at that time they didn't want to take the risk, and they didn't take the risk because they didn't see the reward. And when you start talking about risk, fast forward now, that was in the year 2000. Now we're in 2023, and Blockbuster is no more and Netflix still is, right? And so but if they had have taken the risk back 20 in 20 in the year 2000, they could have positioned themselves to be able to still be around. Because it's true, this thing called interrupting the pattern is not just about habits, it's about life, man. It's about business, it's about economics, right? It's about seeing beyond the now to see what's coming next. And even if I the conflict of next is you don't always see it vividly, but you have to know that the way things are now is not the way things will always be. And so that makes us talk about not just risk, but that makes us talk about routine. Because so often as creatures of habit, we find our routines and we stay in those routines. Now, if you're like me, man, I let me just be honest. I'm not a routine person. I don't like to be a routine person. Let me put it like that. I don't like routine. When I left uh, when I left a 9 to 5 model, man, and I started entrepreneurship, man, I was like, I didn't leave a structured environment to come and have a structured environment. I want to be able to work when I want to work and do as I want to do, and why would I leave that and then come here and still, have resemble that. And so I was like, no, I don't. But it wasn't just about the work, it was just about me, period. And I believe, I was born in 1984. I am considered a millennial, and there are many people in my generation who have the same struggle. We struggle with routine, and it's not such a bad thing. It's only a bad thing when we become inconsistent. It's only a bad thing when we don't produce, right? And hey, I'm not perfect, and so there are some times that I don't make deadlines. I'm not perfect, and so there are some times that I'm just not coming through, and it's okay. It's okay. I don't measure myself based off of my past missed marks, and so I just keep going, right? And there are people who give grace, and then there are people who are just like, hey, no, I can't do it, and I respect it, right? But at the end of the day, it routine is a blessing, and can also and can also be a burden at the same time. It's a blessing because it establishes a rhythm, right? Routine is good to establish rhythms, but then also sometimes that routine is you've had that routine so long that there comes a point in time where that routine needs to be switched. And that's the point of talking about switching it up, because if the routine, hey, routine is good, right? Setting the routine is good. A routine is in fact a form of a habit, but sometimes when we're talking about interrupting the pattern, it means we got to switch it up. And maybe today there's something that you have grown stale with, something that you've grown impatient with, something that you're no longer fond of, something that you had fire and vigor for at one point, that you've lost it. And perhaps the play could be to switch it up, not to throw it away, but just to switch it up, because sometimes it's a matter of routine that becomes the enemy to the reward. Because if we just keep doing it the way we've always done it, no one who's exercising can continue the same routine for too long, because eventually what happens is your muscles and your body get accustomed. If you keep doing the same reps the exact same way, the same number of times every day, that becomes a routine. And for a moment and for a season it works, but eventually the body becomes accustomed to it, and it becomes immune to that. And so you're no it no longer responds to that same routine. And so what has to happen is you've got to switch it up. You got to psych your muscles out. What happens? You got to psych your mind out. What happens is you got to switch it up. And so that what I'm telling us today is perhaps maybe the remedy is to reward is to try something different. Einstein is accredited with saying we seldom solve the problems with the same level of consciousness that we created it in. So the same mindset you had when you created the problem is not the same mindset that you're going to need in order to solve the problem. So it's going to have to require us to think different. And when we think different, we try different. When we think different, we try different. Because here's the thing, we cannot attempt to solve today's problems with yesterday's solutions. We cannot attempt to solve today's problems with yesterday's solutions, because there's always a problem. Yes, then tension. There's always a problem. There's always a tension. There's always a problem to solve and a tension to manage. You don't manage problems, you solve problems. And perhaps many of us sometimes, in the sake of routine, we start managing problems instead of attempting to solve the problem. Routine sometimes will have you managing a thing that really needs to be solved. Routine will have you pacifying a thing that you really just need to put in its place. And so when we start talking, we got to think different, and when we think different, we position ourselves to try different. That there's a story about this man who goes to a doctor, and he's like, man, I'm retired, and I eat too much, I drink too much, I smoke too much, I'm fat, I'm just miserable. Can you help me? And the doctor says, okay, well, where do you buy your alcohol? He's like, it's a store right around the corner. He's like, okay, well, where do you get your cigarettes? He's like, it's a little store around the corner. He's like, where do you eat most of the time? He's like, it's just some, a nice restaurant not far from my house. He says, okay, well, I can identify your first problem. Your first problem is convenience. And there are so many of us that have subconsciously convenienced our habits. Our habits have become habits because as a byproduct of convenience. And so he says, I tell you what, stop going to the places that are closest to you and start venturing out further from you. And matter of fact, don't even drive, walk. If it's a mile or two away, walk it. And he says, hey, and I'm gonna tell you something. If you want to break your habits, you got to interrupt your patterns, and you got to get out of the routine, because the routine is what's got you in a rut in the first place. And you got to think different. And then once you start thinking different, and I know the proper terminology could be thinking differently, as some would say, but listen, think different, try different, right? Think different, try different, because we think one of two ways. We think incrementally, or we think exponentially. Incrementally says, I'm just trying to figure out right now. Exponentially says, I can't just be focused on now. I've got to also figure in the next factor. Incrementally says, I'm just trying to appease right now. But exponentially says, delayed gratification sometimes is the best gratification, because I'm choosing what I want most over what I want now. All right. Hey, so listen, today's transformational truth is we got to think different so that we can try different, and we've got to break the routine, switch it up, and take the risk. Take the risk, because the reward is always going to be greater than the risk. And whatever it is, man, try it. Do it for a day. Do it again, because if you show me your habits, I can show you your future. And you are on the road. Maybe this is the month to becoming the best version of you that you've ever been. That'll change the rest of this month. That will maybe even change the rest of the year, and possibly the rest of your life. Man, it's 22 days. And I think it's important that I point out that it is said that sometimes habits are formed within 21 days, man. And I said that to say this. Imagine where you could be now, and what you could have accomplished by now if you would have started 21 days ago. Imagine what habits you could have right now. Imagine what you could have kept record of, and said, I made this, or I broke this, I started this, I stopped this. Now, I'm not saying that you failed, but what I am saying is start today, because today is what matters the most. All right. So, hey, I'm out of here. And hey, I'll see y'all tomorrow. Until then, hey, do it for a day. Take the risk, break the routine, and let's go for the reward.